All right, let's talk about the college football playoffs. The official bracket is out now, and I want to break down my thoughts on it and who I think the first round winners are going to be. But first, please like, comment, subscribe. Let's go ahead and get right into it, starting at the top with Indiana at the 1 seed, which I have no problem with. They are the last remaining undefeated team in the country, and they beat Ohio State in the conference championship game, so that number 1 spot is well deserved. And at number 2, I'm a little bit surprised that Ohio State only moved down that far. I feel like this spot probably should have gone to Georgia. Georgia dominated in their conference championship game against the team that beat them earlier in the season, and Georgia is way more battle tested. They have a higher strength of schedule. So to me, Georgia deserved the 2 spot and Ohio State deserved the 3 spot, but I'm not complaining too much because I actually think Georgia has a easier path playing either Ole Miss, who's already, they've already beaten without their head coach and some of their staff, or a G5 Tulane team. Meanwhile, Ohio State has to play either Miami or Texas A&M, so I don't envy that spot. Kind of glad Georgia got number 3, so I'm not going to complain too much. The next 2 spots make perfect sense to me as well. Texas Tech taking that last bye week after dominating in their conference championship game, and their only loss coming earlier in the season without their starting quarterback, so they definitely earned that spot. Oregon takes the very favorable 5 spot, which makes sense with their only loss being to the now number 1 team in the country. Then there's some slight disagreements and debate between 6 and 7.
6, 7.
Anyways, Ole Miss gets the 6th spot and A&M gets the 7th spot. It makes sense to me because Ole Miss has the better loss, but I definitely understand the arguments being made about Ole Miss not having their head coach and some of those staff members. And the criteria clearly states that an injury to a player or missing coaches is a factor in how they rank the teams, which they put into place after FSU got screwed out of a playoff spot a few years ago, but they did not seem to punish Ole Miss at all here. We have not seen them play without Lane Kiffin, so we have no data points to go off of, and I think the committee actually made the right decision here. Oklahoma at 8 also makes a lot of sense to me. It's the first 2-loss team in the mix, but definitely deserving of the spot they got. They've had a very difficult schedule, and they came away with some really good wins, most notably that win over Alabama carrying a lot of weight. And then at number 9, we have our first major controversy. Alabama, after getting destroyed in the SEC Championship game, is picking up their 3rd loss. They did not move at all in the rankings. Now, the first debate is whether Alabama should be in the playoffs at all with a 3rd loss. I believe that they are the first 3-loss team in the college football playoff history to make it, and with them being so close to the bubble, a lot of people were starting to talk about whether that 3rd loss, along with the eye test, would be enough to drop them out. And that conversation got even louder considering they got blown out in that conference championship game against Georgia. And I would have loved that scenario, don't get me wrong, but as many Alabama fans would point out, that would really devalue conference championship games and would likely be the beginning of the end for conference championship games. So I don't want them to go away in the future. I think they made the right decision here as far as keeping them in. Last season, the committee made it pretty clear that teams would not get punished much for being rewarded with the privilege to play in the conference championship games. They maintain that this year with Alabama, and I don't have an issue with them keeping them in. However, I do have an issue with Alabama not moving in seeding at all. I do believe that they should have dropped a spot or 2. Add in the fact that the committee did not keep that same philosophy with BYU, who had a very similar performance in their conference championship game and did move in the rankings. They went down and got knocked out of the playoffs. If you want to sell me on the idea that the committee strictly wants the 12 best teams in the country, then that's fine. But at that point, Notre Dame should have been in over Alabama, which is what we were going to talk about at our next spot with number 10. Which is probably the most interesting and most controversial spot in the whole bracket. Ever since the very first CFP ranking, Notre Dame has been ranked higher than Miami, and it seemed pretty clear that despite Miami having the head-to-head over Notre Dame, that these 2 teams, even though they have the same record, they'd put Notre Dame in over the Hurricanes. And that my stance on Miami is not great. I hate Miami, but I've always thought that they were the more deserving team of making the playoffs over Notre Dame because of that head-to-head. But the closer we got to Selection Sunday, the closer Miami and Notre Dame got to each other in the rankings, and the committee explained that the head-to-head did not come into play since Notre Dame was not in the same grouping of teams. Well, in the last few rankings, Notre Dame and Miami were in the same grouping, and yet they still saw some separation, maybe like 1 team separation, which was apparently enough for the committee to not swap the 2 teams. It was not until Selection Sunday that they finally flipped Miami and Notre Dame and putting Miami in and leaving Notre Dame at home, which is kind of wild to me. Like I said, I have no problem with the outcome, but the process is really messed up. So why did they make that switch? My personal opinion is that they didn't have the balls to leave the ACC out of the playoffs completely. So once Virginia squandered their opportunity, the committee wanted to make sure at least 1 ACC team would make the field. So again, at the end of the day, I think the committee made the right decision by putting Miami in over Notre Dame, but it's just such a ridiculous process. And if Miami was going to be put ahead of Notre Dame, it should have been done weeks ago, but instead Notre Dame got led to believe that they were in a lock for the playoffs just to get booted out in a week that neither of them even played. So Hey, I don't feel too bad because Notre Dame could have avoided all of this if they just played in the conference and maybe scheduled the better teams and didn't lose to the two teams that they scheduled that were actually ahead of polls. But hey, that's football. So starts from right, I guess, and then we have to talk about the two G5 teams at 11 and 12. It's kind of crazy that because of how the playoff is structured, we have two G5 teams instead of a team like Notre Dame, but that's how we structure things. I don't think it's a good way, but that's what we got. And I don't think there's really much debate about the placement of these two G5 teams as far as who should be ranked over the other. I think Tulane absolutely deserved a higher ranking than James Madison. They had a stronger strength of the schedule, and the American is a better conference to play in. But I really think it's wild that we are still guaranteeing spots for the G5 teams. They clearly aren't going to win at all, much less even win one game in this playoff system. So I don't see much point of wasting a spot or two on them. If it were me, I would either not guarantee a spot, so they would have to, go a perfect season and schedule up, kind of like everyone else getting a at-large bid. They could maybe get an at-large bid if they play good enough, or just let the G5 have their own separate playoffs because they don't play the same sport as the P4 teams do. Well, they might play the same sport as the ACC does, but that's a topic for a different day. So with all the playoff spots filled, let's talk matchups. And I'm actually not super thrilled about this first round, which is really sad because this is the round with the home playoff games. But we unfortunately have a lot of rematches and games that are a bit underwhelming because of those two G5 teams. So let's start with the one game I think that is more interesting than the rest, the most exciting game, and that's Miami at Texas A&M. This is going to be a super fun matchup. It's a battle between the two teams that actually beat Notre Dame and got them booted from the race. I have a pretty clear lean on this game, though, and that's A&M. I feel much better about a one-loss team from the SEC than I have a two-loss team from the ACC, especially when the two-loss team from the ACC only has one impressive win, and it came in week one. And you add in home field advantage at a place like Kyle Field, and I think you have to like A&M in this matchup. They have some legit weapons and can win multiple styles of games. Now, I know Texas, them losing to Texas is really concerning. Marcel Reed has to take better care of the football, but that was a rivalry game on the road against a very talented team that decided to finally show up for that game. Miami's losses are far more concerning to me. SMU and Louisville are mediocre at best, and it felt pretty clear that Miami has some glaring flaws, and they are not very consistent. I'm not the biggest Mario Cristobal fan either. I don't really believe he is one of the better coaches in the sport. I think that he has pretty bad clock management skills, and I just don't think he always puts Miami in the best position to win. Now, don't get me wrong, Miami has a ton of talent to compete and win this game. They can do the exact same thing that Texas did. If the right version of Carson Beck shows up and they can push the ball down the field, they have a ton of ways that they can win. But A&M is just more proven and more trusted product to me. I really like the combination of Marcel Reed, Casey Concepcion, and Mario Craver, and they should get their star running back from injury, Le'Veon Moss. So they have a ton of offensive weapons to work with. I like their defense. They show up in big moments, and I trust the coaching staff. I trust the ability to win big games, and I trust the home field advantage, and I trust that the SEC is a superior conference, so give me the Aggies at home. And the other interesting game in the first round is a rematch between Alabama and Oklahoma. We saw this game a few weeks ago. It was a pretty wild game. Alabama won the stat sheet, but Oklahoma was able to force enough turnovers to get the actual win. Both offenses were very limited. Neither can run the ball very well at all. I do think Alabama has a better passing attack, but here's the thing. The last game was played in Alabama's building. This game is being played at Oklahoma's place. So while I do think Alabama is the better overall team, home field advantage could make things even more interesting, especially with injuries that Alabama is dealing with right now. We do get a few weeks for both teams to get healthy, but who knows who will be ready to play in this game. And we do have to acknowledge special teams in games we expect to be low scoring like this one. Oklahoma has one of the best kickers in the country, and Alabama has one of the worst. It was a factor last time, and it could be a factor again here. All things considered, I do think Alabama wins the rematch. I think they have the better team, and I doubt Oklahoma will be able to force as many turnovers as they were the first time. I think they win a low-scoring matchup to advance to the next round. Now, the last two matchups I won't spend a lot of time on because those are the two games that the G5 teams are playing in, and I do think Tulane versus Ole Miss has a little bit more juice due to the whole Lane Kiffin situation, so let's talk about that one first. Yes, Ole Miss is without their head coach and plenty of offensive staff members, and in the next round, that will likely play a big factor into who I choose, but I do not think it's going to matter in this game. We've already seen this game once in Oxford. It was a dominant 45-10 victory for the Rebels. Maybe they are not quite as dominant here, but they are still winning this game for sure. They have every edge imaginable, better talent, better depth, home field advantage, on and on and on. Don't get me wrong, I like Tulane. They have beaten a few Power 4 teams this season, including the ACC champion, and I think John Summerall is a great coach, but come on, this will not be a contest. So I'm not even going to discuss how much of a mismatch Kawan Lacey or Trinidad Chambliss or any other Ole Miss star is going to be against this Tulane team. Kiffin or no Kiffin, they can handle this game. Give me the Rebels. And then we have to talk about James Madison at Oregon. And I expect much of the same. Good for the Dukes. They made it to the dance, but this is their last stop. They are not beating Oregon, especially not Knotson, and it's just not happening. You can do what you want against other G5 teams, but that is not going to work here. They couldn't even beat Louisville, so why would I expect them to beat Oregon? It's just not going to happen. So that is my comprehensive breakdown of the playoff field. Stay tuned because I have a lot of great content coming up. See you next time. Peace.